Hey there, friends and enemies, JoPa here again, and with the First Descendant launching next week on July 2nd, I figured now it would be the perfect time to go over all of the different characters you can potentially unlock when the game does drop. Now, they just revealed to us 3 additional characters that were not previously playable, so I'm going to go over the ones that we have had a chance to check out first and then jump into those as well. Starting with Lepic. This was one of the 3 main starting characters when you first got into the original beta, and he is a DPS crowd control character. He has a passive skill Close Call. There's a chance of surviving fatal damage during battle. Then he's also got the grenade, which essentially is a standard grenade, but extra burns when overclock is active. That is very, very important, as overclock increases all skill attack and adds a burn effect to grenade and overkill for a set duration. You combine this with the traction grenade, which throws a traction grenade forward to pull enemies within range, and then also the final ability, which is overkill, fires a powerful shell at the enemy. The shell is maintained at a landing point for a set period of time, inflicting constant damage. So, essentially, you want to use your overclock first, and then toss a traction grenade, followed by either your overkill or a regular grenade, to essentially burn all the enemies within a set area. And he is essentially a fantastic crowd control enemy. Anytime there's waves of ads to clear, he is going to be perfect for that. And if you're a fan of fire and grenade abilities, he is going to be a very good one to check out. Pretty much a basic starting character, nothing too crazy. But then we move on into Ajax. He is your first tank character that you can play as, and I personally very much enjoy him. Also, I'm going to go back real quick and show this little animation from Lepic with his grenade as well. I really like what they did here. Plus, he has that rocket arm, which looks pretty sick. Now, as far as Ajax, he is a tank who utilizes Void Energy. He has the passive skill Event Horizon. Acquires Void Energy after using skills. When the Void Energy reaches its maximum amount, it enhances skills and grants additional effects. So essentially, you want to prioritize skill cooldown and using your skills as often as possible. He has Orbit Barrier, which creates a shield in front of Ajax. Durability increases proportionally to Ajax's HP and defense. So, if you stack high HP and defense for him, he is going to get a stronger shield. If enhanced, reflects damage proportional to defense to enemies hitting the barrier. So essentially, this can send attacks back at enemies, and really, you can make him incredibly tanky with that high HP and defense alongside this barrier. He also has Void Walk, leaps in the air, and lands on the ground to strike nearby enemies. This ability is nice, but I don't think it's that effective, especially once you start getting into harder content. Then we've got the Expulsion, strikes nearby enemies, knocking them back. This is, again, a nice thing, especially when you have enemies close in range, and then you set up a barrier here, and then you can send them back outside of the barrier and use the reflection as well. And then finally, he has Hypercube, creates a dome-shaped shield. Durability, again, increases proportionally to HP and defense. So you can protect areas. If you have activities that require you to hold a point, he is fantastic. If you have quick movement types of activities, maybe he's not going to be the one that is going to shine as much. I do like him as a starting character. He's probably, if we start with the same 3 that we did during the betas, he was one that I would lean towards just because I feel like he is incredibly useful, especially because most players prefer to play DPS characters, so having a tank on your team who can essentially control areas is very, very nice. Then we've got Viessa. She is the 3rd of the starting characters during the beta that we were able to use. She has a debuffer role who uses Chill at will. She has the first passive skill, Ice Sphere, creates an ice sphere floating around her body when inflicting enemies with the Ice Shackle effect, proportionally affects stage. The Ice Sphere will automatically fly towards nearby enemies and deal damage to the target and its surrounding. This is very nice, and I like this ability quite a bit. And then we've also got the active skills of Frost Shards, fires an exploding ice beam, inflicting damage, and Ice Shackle. around the area hits. So again, some crowd control there, which is nice. And then Ice Shackle effect increases by 1 stage when hit, increases by 2 stages if hit by the exploding area. Then we got the Frost Road, increases running speed and shield. Essentially, she glides along ice, and it's really a cool effect that I like a lot. And it makes her a lot more of a movement character. Creates ice sheets on the ground where Viessa stands. When enemies come into contact with these ice sheets, they are inflicted with Ice Shackle. Increases by 2 stages with the Ice Shackle. And then we got Cold Snap, releases an arc of cold air in front, inflicting damage and Ice Shackle. And essentially, you've got Blizzard. Creates a snowstorm that explodes over time, inflicting damage and Ice Shackle. So essentially what you want to be doing is getting Ice Shackle on enemies as often as possible. Use that before you start hitting them with your weapons, because you want to make sure that they're debuffed with one of your skills. Unlike the other characters who have a set rotation, she is just going to use her skills on cooldown when she has them in order to constantly debuff other enemies. So I do feel like she's going to be an interesting character to play. She's not going to have the highest DPS or insane crowd control, but she is going to be very useful on certain teams when you're tackling different types of content. Then moving on, we got Jayber, who's a utility dealer, a utility type DPS who uses turrets. If you are a player who likes turrets in game, this is going to be the guy for you. I found him to be very fun and very reliable, especially if you're taking on activities that don't require you to move around the map as much, and when you're fighting the giant bosses that you face in the game as well. He can be very, very effective. So he's got turret sync. Attack increases when assault turret and medical turret are both summoned. Then we've got the assault turret. Summons assault turret to attack the enemy. If enhanced, it launches attacks into nearby areas. We got the medical turret, summons a medical turret to heal allies and distract enemies. That second part is very important. If enhanced, it restores mana. Then we've got the next one, which is the multi-purpose gun. Changes gun to a multi-purpose gun. If hit by a multi-purpose gun, turret enters an enhanced state. And then finally, we've got the reactivate. It recalls all summoned turrets and inflicts powerful damage to nearby enemies. After using total recall, you enter overhaul state where turrets are summoned in their enhanced state. So, if you time it right, you could be able to summon your turrets. You have a attack turret and a healing turret on the field at the same time. Then you would want to use your reactivate in order to make them explode, and then hopefully have your turrets back on cooldown so you can re-summon them. And again, there are certain types of missions that this character doesn't really shine on. If you have to continuously move and you can't just set up with your turrets necessarily, but if you are doing any kind of defense mission, just like Ajax, he can come in handy quite a bit. Same thing again with those boss fights, he can be very, very helpful. So then moving on, we are going to go over Sharen, close range dealer. She is a character I didn't really like. Assassin type melee dealer with electric arc. Now, she's got the Assassinator, damage increases when attacking enemy that is not attacking Sharen. So if you are a rogue type player, if you like to play stealthy, she's going to be the one for you for sure. Killing enemies with skill and ambush state resets cooldown for active camouflage. Then we've got Cut Off Beam. Attacks enemies with electric blade to deal damage and inflict them with an electrocute effect. Moving on, we got Active Camouflage, hides from enemies. When attacking or using skills, Active Camouflage state ends immediately, regardless of time remaining. When Active Camouflage state ends, Sharen enters ambush mode, increasing damage for the next attack. So if you're using something like a sniper or other single shot big damage dealer, that's where she's going to be the most effective. And I feel like there's going to be some insane DPS with her ambush state. Impact rounds launches built-in explosives forward from the arm to stun enemies, which is nice, especially if you're trying to get around the battlefield. And then Flash Short Sword targets enemies with aiming range and throws multiple knives to attack them. Knives explode to inflict enemies with damage and electrocute. So again, she's going to be electrocuting enemies, which is nice, but her main thing is going invisible and trying to deal maximum damage to enemies at a given time. Then we've got Gley, who is a utility dealer who becomes stronger the more she gnaws on herself, which sounds hilarious. She's got Thirst, creates life spears upon killing enemies, recovers HP and stores power of life when absorbing life spears. Then we've got the active skill Frenzied, consumes HP to enter Berserk mode. In Berserk mode, long distance weapons attack and penetration increase. Then we've got the Life Siphon, deals damage to nearby enemies and restores HP. In Berserk mode, damage increases. In normal mode, damage inflicted by enemies decreases for a certain period of time. Then we've got the Increased Sensory Singular. Her increased sensory adds infinite ammo effect for a certain amount of time during frenzy. When in a non-frenzied state, increases movement speed and HP recovery, during which life sphere generation is increased. And then Massacre. Changes current firearm to Massacre, adds additional skill damage during frenzied state, and inflicts stun effect on hit enemies. So essentially, her main thing is going to be balancing when you want to go berserk, when you want to be frenzied, versus when you don't want to be. Because obviously with the frenzy, you're going to do the more damage, but you'll probably be more vulnerable. You won't be regenerating your health as much with those life spheres. So you're going to want to really be smart about the way that you end up going berserk ultimately. And I think that could provide an interesting gameplay style if you're a fan of it, but I don't know if she's going to be a character that's going to be necessarily for everyone, based on the fact that she also has an ability that replaces one of your weapons. So if you're a big time weapon user, then she's not going to be as much of a character that you're going to enjoy. Blair, damage over time dealer, a chef who deals continuous damage and who manipulates fire. Once again, we have another fire character, and the damage over time effects, I think, are interesting. I don't know if they were strong enough previously to be especially useful, but he's got the Pitmaster ability. Critical hit damage increases when attacking enemies in burn state, and then critical hit chance increases depending on the number of stoves in the battlefield. If you're a crit player, he is going to be one that could be actually insane. Blaze Up spurts flames to deal damage to nearby enemies and creates stove. Stove inflicts constant damage and burn effects to nearby enemies. Then we've also got Extinguish, retrieves stoves in the battlefield and restores mana. Retrieving stoves increases defense. So you want to keep the stoves on the field to do increased damage and also do that increased crit chance, but also use them as a defensive mechanism if you need more mana and also need to be on the defensive. Then we've got Burn Taste, spurts flame forwards. Enemies near the flames arrival point are inflicted with constant damage and burn. And then we've got Deadly Cuisine, throws a large fireball forward. Large fireball splits into small fireballs, causing extra explosion. Explosion damage inflicts burn and creates stove on the ground. Stove deals constant damage with burn effect. So essentially, he's going to be constantly doing damage. If you take cover, you can use him pretty effectively. And another one that may benefit from high damage single shot weapons because of how much he's going to rely on burn, but also the crit damage and crit chance. So I do feel like he's an interesting character that once people get used to him, I think he's going to be a better fire damage dealer than the other options, but we'll have to wait and see. Then we've got Bunny. She's one of the fan favorites. She's called a nuker, a dealer of continuous damage who sprints while discharging electricity. Her movement is insane. Maybe not as good of a character for defending objectives, but for everything else in the game, she's pretty wild. She's got Rabbit Foot, charges electricity when moving, inflicts damage to nearby enemies when landing after a double jump. This actually is a very useful ability. Then we got Throw Bomb, summons Electro Orb to attack nearby enemies, inflict them with electrocute effect. Light speeding, sprint speed increases significantly and acquires more electricity. You want to use this before racing around the battlefield and doing that double jump traditionally. Then we've got Lightning Emission, moving around deals damage to nearby enemies, inflicts them with electrocute. Again, you want to essentially use light speeding first before you activate Lightning Emission. And then finally, she got Maximum Power. Shoots out electricity forward to inflict damage. This looks like a Kamehameha, and it's absolutely insane as long as you're able to get it charged up with your electricity and then have the skill duration last as long as possible. So she is one that I think a lot of people will like for a number of reasons. She's a very good character, but also there's a lot of thirst about her as well. So definitely stay tuned for that. And then we got Freyna. She's another damage over time dealer who deals venom damage, which I like the toxic version of the damage over time more than the fire personally from what I've seen, but I know other people who prefer a fire dot dealer. So increases toxic skill power. Contagion links increases toxic skill power by the number of nearby enemies inflicted with poison with Freyna skills. So she is really effective when there are a lot of enemies nearby. Toxic Trauma. Throws a poison to attack target enemy with damage and inflict room 0 trauma into nearby enemies. Then we've got Defense Mechanism. Significantly increases defense. There's a chance of inflicting room 0 trauma to enemies upon attack. And then Decomposed Poison. Throws toxin in the form of Toxic Swamp. Enemies entering the Toxic Swamp receive continuous damage and become inflicted with poison and venom soaked. Enemies inflicted with venom soaked leave toxic footprints as they move, and enemies that touch toxic footprints also become poisoned. So essentially, if there's a overwhelming number of ads, she's going to be, in my opinion, the best of the ad clearers that we've seen so far. The crowd control, which I really, really like. Venomous Baptism. Changes current firearm to Venom Baptism. Enemies hit with Venom Baptism bullets are inflicted with room 0 trauma. So essentially, she is insane for dealing with a bunch of ads, not as much for single target stuff, and that's really going to be her major downside. If you're tackling activities where there aren't a lot of ads, she just isn't going to be as effective. But if you're getting overwhelmed and overrun, she's going to be fantastic. Then we got Valby. This is one that I have seen the most hype for since the previous playtest. Constant DPS with her water abilities. She's got water intake when using skills. While standing on water, she consumes less mana, which you should preferably would be on water all the time with her different abilities. Bubble Bullet. Bounces a bubble bullet forward to create a small puddle where the bubble bullet impacts and where she stands. Enemies in the small puddle take continuous damage and are inflicted with laundry. Then we got Plop Plop. Creates a large puddle where she is standing, then dives in. Valby then pops up on a selected location in the large puddle. Enemies in the large puddle take continuous damage and are inflicted with laundry. We've got Laundry. Valby becomes liquefied. When liquefied, she cannot take feet off the ground or use skills, but she can move through enemies, and her movement and defense increases. When moving while liquefied, she creates a path of water that deals continuous damage to enemies and inflicts laundry. Then finally, we've got Laundry Bomb. Changes the equivalent weapon to a Laundry Bomb launcher. When the launcher is fired, a Laundry Bomb is created, pulling at enemies and inflicting laundry and dealing continuous damage. So the water effects are very good. She is insane for crowd control as well, but also very, very good for single target damage, and probably the best all-around character that we were able to use in previous playtests, in my personal opinion. Moving on, we have Kyle. He is a bruiser. I am not a fan of Kyle. He's, in my opinion, the most generic ability character that we had so far. A damage-dealing tank who generates and manipulates magnetic fields. Kyle acquires magnetic force through skills with his experienced technician. When his shield is completely depleted, he recovers shield and magnetic force over a certain period of time. Repulsion Dash dashes towards enemies, dealing damage and recovering magnetic force. Magnetic Bulwark creates a frontal barrier to protect against enemy attacks, recovers magnetic force depending on the type of projectile blocked. Magnetism Spurt. When damaged, magnetic force is reduced instead of HP or shields. After a certain period of time, magnetic force detonates to deal damage random. And Superconductivity Thrusters allows him to fly when landing, deals damage in the area around his landing zone, consuming all accumulated magnetic force. The damage dealt is proportional to the amount of magnetic force consumed. I think he will be very good when you can build around him in certain ways, but for the starting character, as you are jumping into the game, Ajax is a tank that I just personally prefer the playstyle of, so I probably won't be getting Kyle anytime soon, especially when you have to farm for these characters or purchase them. Esiemo, this is a new character who we haven't been able to play as. Burst DPS, a burst DPS who handles explosives. Seems pretty similar to other characters. Drops a bomb on the ground when the shield is completely depleted with his adventurous habit. He's got Time Bomb, launches a sticky bomb forward. He does do fire damage as well, so he's the third of the fire characters. Launches a sticky bomb forward. The sticky bomb attaches to an enemy or terrain feature on contact. He's got Blast, instantly detonates attached bombs. Bombs damage increase with the number of attached bombs. So he could be a very good single target DPS, it looks like. That's probably why it says burst DPS, because he's going to do a lot of his damage at one time. Guided landmine, place a landmine at a current location. Once placed, the guided landmine will fly to an enemy within its detection range and attach to it. And then arc explosion Starts moving forward fast. On collision with the enemy while charging, inflicts knockback. When the movement ends, deals damage to nearby enemies and removes buffs from them. After the skill ends, Esiemo enters a madness state. So, again, I don't know if he's necessarily going to be a character for me, but it does sound like he's going to be doing pretty insane damage. Enzo is a support who uses supply drones. This will be kind of like the turret character, but probably more focused on being able to move around the map with your drones. So shoot support grants fire support to allies within an area around Enzo, increasing their max ammo capacity. That's nice. This efficiency of this effect increases marginally with the number of Enzos in the squad. Efficiency increases with Enzo disarms the security of the encrypted vault, and rewards increased when this happens. He's got start supply. Summons a bullet supplying device at the designated location. Supplies bullets to allies that approach the device. The bullet supplying device can be used once by each ally and disappears when everyone has used it or its duration ends. So, if you have a mission where you're running out of ammo frequently, that could be very, very useful. Explosive drone launches an explosive drone forward. Explosive drone explodes on contact with an enemy or a terrain object, dealing damage. Enhanced combat suit summons a shield recovery comms. When the shield recovery comms is first summoned, recovers Enzo's energy shield by a certain amount, and then continues to recover the energy shield through enhanced combat suit effect. And finally, perfect support summons a small supply ship to himself and his allies. Small supply ship periodically provides supply bullets and grants perfect support to allies. Small supply ship attacks enemies in front while it is active, and when the skill ends, it fires a missile towards that causes a big explosion at its detonation. So if you want to play a full support build, Enzo is likely going to be the one for you. No healing there, but it does seem like they're going to be very useful in a squad, especially if you have the other roles filled. And then finally, we have Yujin, healer supporter that uses drones to heal. So again, healing drones are very, very nice, and you always want a healer on the team. Then we've got the stop overreacting, significantly reduces the time to rescue allies. Targets rescued by Yujin increases to max HP for a certain period of time. Solidarity healing summons a recovery drone that attaches to allies to heal them. Recovers a target and increases their attack through an accelerator effect upon dismissal. That's really cool. I think that could be incredibly useful. Restructure serum fires a restructuring serum forward, decreasing defense and inflicting allergy when attacking enemies with allergy. Heals nearby allies and grants additional healing to allies who kill enemies. This guy is going to be super useful. Stimulant spray grants stimulation to allies while stimulation is active, increases damage. Incoming damage is reduced, and recovery is received when stimulation ends. Again, very, very useful. And then hyper-reactive healing ground. Heals self and allies, granting purification and immunity to remove and prevent debuffs. Additionally, recovery is based on the number of allies and enemies within range. Yujin is granted hyper-activity effect, increases attack and skill power. He sounds like he's going to be nuts. Okay, that's really, really cool. Then we move on to... he's probably my favorite of the three newly announced characters, by the way. Now we have Ultimate Lepic, Ultimate Viessa, Ultimate Ajax, Ultimate Bunny, and then Ultimate Gley. Now, all these characters are going to be essentially just upgraded versions of their base forms, but I don't know how we're going to be able to unlock them, so that's going to be really, really dependent. It does look like their abilities are the same, so they're just going to be better versions, I would imagine. Now, I hope you enjoyed the video. This is going to be my wrap-up. I do feel like I have characters that I'm gunning for first. I'll probably start with Ajax as a tank character. I will get Yujin as early as I possibly can. And then for DPS, I would probably go with Bunny or maybe Valby. But I know a lot of people will be playing them, so maybe I will swap over to Esiemo or somebody for that burst damage. Anyway, let me know which characters you're most interested in playing, what you're most excited about with the First Descendant. My name is JoPaWrites. If you enjoyed the video, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, helps me out tremendously. Shows you want to see more of the First Descendant content. I know this is a bit of a longer video, so I appreciate you sticking around. Have a good one. I'll catch you all later.